It's the 1st of January, so Happy New Year, welcome in 2025. But let's today recap the month of December 2024, but also a little bit of the year as a whole and look a little bit into 2025. First and foremost, this is the in and out video for December. So how was my December? Now, I really try to plan and not make it stressful. And I think that happened, that worked, that was good for the most part. Still, in the end, I did not have as much free time as I thought I would, but I think everything went well. No major stressors, unexpected things happened. And also I had a few lovely, incredibly beautiful days after Christmas spending with friends, and we were really lucky with the weather and the nature and the temperatures. So we got to experience one day didn't really work out as we planned. We wanted to go sledding in the mountains, and in the end it was kind of like a tourist trap thing where what we actually wanted didn't work, and then we had to pay a lot of money and the experience was not what we wished it would be. But then the second day we were really lucky and we had an amazing day. And so you could see a few pictures. You can also check out Instagram for a few more. And that's kind of my December. Christmas was as usual in my case. Sometimes it can be a little bit stressful, but then also it's pretty beautiful. And we had a very, very chill New Year's Eve. And today is a new year, a new month. So let's move on to the stuff and talk about the things that have come into my life in December. Now, I kind of thought that it maybe would be more because I'm always kind of surprised by how much it is. And then there's Christmas. But I know my people, they know I'm a minimalist, so it's not that much. Let's start with something that was not a Christmas present, and it's this book. I just picked it up in one of these public bookshelves. It's an author that I have read one book of, and I really like that book. When I read is it called blurb? It doesn't really sound great, but I love the other book, so I'm just hoping it will be amazing too. So I'm gonna tell you more about it once I read it, but that came into my life in December. But then continuing to the Christmas stuff, more books. This is the book I got from my Secret Santa. Now, I'm not sure if you can see it. It's Parable of a Sower by Octavia E. Butler. And I think I've heard of that book before. And I'm pretty sure it's going to be good. But again, I'm going to tell you more about it once I've read it. And I haven't yet. And then I got another book for Christmas, which is called Ja heißt Ja, ? Feministische Debatten einvernehmlichen Sex, which kind of means yes, feminist, conversations about consensual sex. And this is a book an acquaintance of me read 2 years ago, and we talked about it a little bit, and it just stuck in my mind and I wanted to read it. And so this is one of the things I got from my boyfriend. I'm looking forward to reading it. I also got an ebook that I'm going to talk more about, but it's not really a physical thing, so But I also got a knife. So this is kind of like a joke because it's the brand and it's the kind of knife I prefer to use in the kitchen. And sometimes it's a bit stupid because this is a small knife that's kind of made for maybe cutting bread, because it has these things, it's not a straight normal blade it's called. But this is just my favorite knife. This kind of knife is my favorite knife. And this is kind of the pocket version or the travel version of it. So it's not really something I really, really need or I wished for, but it's gonna come in handy when camping, and it's a very, very thoughtful gift. I also got this from my boyfriend, and then from my son, I got this little turtle, which is also a measuring tape, which is great because I do have a measuring tape like this and I sometimes use it, but the measuring tape I own is breaking apart here. And if you know how this works, like this, if it's breaking apart here, it's just gonna vanish into this thing at the point it actually breaks. So I needed a new one of these, and I have one now, and it's just this very cute little turtle. So these are actually the like physical things that came into my life, but I also got some presents that were like eatable. Some chocolate, a really cute letter, some really thoughtful small little consumables from some of my co-workers, which is something I'm really, really grateful for because as you might know, nurturing friendships, deepen friendships, and finding new friends has been one of the things that I wanted to focus on during this past year of 2024, but also before 2023. And you know, that's a lot of work, kind of, and it feels like this work is paying off. Like I'm actually becoming friends with my coworkers, and we're having some really good times and conversations, and so it made me feel amazing, and I loved seeing that they thought of me around Christmas, and so yeah, that was lovely too, but it's nothing really that's gonna stay in my life. Before we talk about the year as a whole and also a little bit about, you know, 2025, let's talk about the books I've read. They're all piled up here, and, you know, let's just gonna try to be quick. Because it's kind of a lot of books. These are not in any particular order, but I'm just gonna start at the top. And this month I'll have all of the books here that I've read, even though some of them are the library's books and I'm gonna return them soon. But let's start with the first one. Why Fish Don't Exist. This book looks great and it reads great. And first it feels really light and wonderful, and then it gets a bit dark, but still very interesting. And honestly, this is true. Fish do not exist. And I can highly recommend this. It's just kind of it's kind of hard to put it into a category, I think, but it's a book I'd highly recommend because you can learn a lot and it's just interesting. And it also says here a story of loss, love, and the hidden order of life. And I think that kind of says it well. So I can recommend this book. I did really like it a lot. It's my boyfriend's, so, you know, it's gonna stay in this apartment. This book is called Mein Wohlstand widert mich an, which is kind of, I'm grossed out by being rich. Like, it's not rich, but it's like being well off, something like that. Written by Anna Meyer. And it was a really great book because I can really relate in a lot of ways. Because I've had a little amount of money for the past few years, so I'm used to thinking a lot about where I spend my money. And that's her position a bit differently because she grew up in poverty and now she has a well-paying job, and she is just kind of talking about all of these things she thinks she spends too much money on and how much like money changes her. But also it's not like money is bad. It's a critique, of course, of the system a little bit, but I just thought it was really, really interesting, and it really makes you just think how you spend your money. I don't think it exists in English though, so if you speak German, I highly recommend this book. This is Das weibliche Prinzip by Meg Wolitzer. This kind of means the female principle. I think it has a different title in English because this one exists in English. I know. The female persuasion. And I liked it, but it was slow. And I've read another book of hers and I had the same experience. Like, it was a good book, it was a good story, but it's a bit slow. So yeah, I recommend it. It's not the very best book I've ever read, but I think it's a good book. And then the next one I read is Climate X, something like that, by Andreas Malm. He is, I think, an activist, and he talks a lot about the how climate change and the pandemic have to do what they have to do with each other, like how viruses and stuff from the wild, from like, yeah, areas where people usually are not, are like, it's a spillover into our communities and things, and that happens by deforestation and things like that. So he talks a lot about this connection and also how politics are reacting to the pandemic, or did a few years ago, versus the climate crisis, which the climate crisis is like the huge thing and the pandemic is kind of a part of it, like to a certain extent. And I thought it was just really interesting, a really interesting aspect I knew of, but now I know more of. So I can also highly recommend this book. And I do think this exists in English as well. I'm actually changing up the way I'm putting the books in the video description. So I changed the app I'm using to the story graph, and that is not available if, like, you can't just click on the link and see the profile. So I'm just gonna put the names, But I'm also going to put the link to my profile. So if you own this app, if you want to have this app, you can follow me there. But you will still have the names of the books and you can still figure them out if you're interested in them. The next book I read is one I borrowed from my boyfriend's sister. It's Red, White and Royal Blue. Now the interesting thing is both of my boyfriend's sisters read this book and didn't like it. I read it and I did like it. Like, it's not the best book ever. It's a queer love story and it's kind of like what would happen if Trump didn't become president in 2016, but like we're going on a different route, a female president, a more queer reality. And it's not like a crazy utopia, but I think this is like a good idea of a story. And the romance itself is, you know, you can read it. I think like it was a good book. I liked it. The next one I read is Stoppt Ableismus by Anne Gersdorf and Karina Sturm. This means stop ableism, which is like, you know, hate towards disabled people and chronically ill people. And it was very interesting because I think ableism is one of these like categories of discrimination where I do know a lot about, but I have a lot of internalized ableism still in me. And I'm really trying, and I've tried before, of course, I'm always like for years now, trying to be very intentional with what I say, of course, and to just, you know, not be discriminating if you don't mean to, I want to say, but no, I never mean to be discriminating. But it was really interesting to read this book to kind of show me even more I haven't been seeing about myself and society. So I can also highly recommend this, and I don't know if it exists in English. The next book I read is Alles Okay, which means Everything Okay by Nina Lacour, maybe? I think this is a different title. I think it's We're Okay or something like that. We Are Okay, yes. Now, I really like this book for its atmosphere. It's also queer and it's about friendship, I'd say mostly. And about loss and mourning and like it was a really, really good book. Like it described feelings really well, and I think the atmosphere definitely fitted like December, Christmas time things. So I really liked it and I read it like in like a few hours. Then the next book I read is Why We Matter by Emilia Roig. And it's a German book and it's about racism and about discrimination in different kinds, about feminism, about love. And there are more books of hers that I really want to read. And I liked like most part of it a lot. There were some things where I, again, like it's maybe not internalized racism, but it's some things where I'm like, I disagree, and I'm not sure how valid it is from which perspective. So I'm always open to learn, but then there are also things like, I don't think I have to agree with everything an author says, even if they're like an expert on their subject. Because the things I'm disagreeing with was not like the main focus of the book. This was especially the case when she talked about science and medicine and how most of it or all of it is like from a male Western patriarchal European perspective. And I agree with that. But then I don't agree with everything she said as a solution maybe. And it was really interesting to learn about that because I don't have like, I had an opinion and now my opinion slightly changed and I'm open to changing it further, but there's just a few questions still. The next book I read is this one, David Wallace-Wells, Die unbewohnbare Erde, which is the uninhabitable earth. This feels very dystopian, but then also it's just reality. So he just projects like what's gonna happen with our world if we continue to emit carbon the way we do right now. And it doesn't look good. And it's really kind of discouraging to read. And what I also find really discouraging is that he talks about all of these things, but then also does not want to change anything about his own lifestyle, which is very unsustainable. Now, in a logical way, I understand that not you can be an expert on something and not do it yourself. But then on the other hand, it's just kind of infuriating me still a little bit, even though I know all of us are hypocrites to some extent. Like none of us do everything perfectly the way we maybe want to, or the way we portray ourselves to other people sometimes. Like we all want to make ourselves a little bit better than we maybe are, and I'm trying to work on that, of course. But how much he just says like, no, I'm not gonna be more sustainable, but still this is what's happening and it's a huge problem, was a bit hard for me to read. And in the end he says like he's very, very hopeful because of the pandemic and how things are changing, but then also it's very hard to read this from today's perspective, where it's like, yes, that's great, but also not much happened, it's not really looking good now. So discouraging, but also really informative, and I would recommend you read it. Then the next book I read is this one. I think this is a pretty famous book. It's Extremely Loud and Incredibly Close by Jonathan Safran Foer. I'm not sure how you pronounce his name. In whatever language it is correctly pronounced. This is a really interesting book. It's also kind of hard to categorize, but it's this little boy and how he sees the world and how he navigates the loss of his father. And I think the most interesting part is just to see the world from the perspective of these protagonists. It's not just him, it's other people too. And yeah, it's definitely worth reading. I would recommend it, and I really like this book too. And then we have the second part of a 3-part series that I talked about in last month's video already. It's The Extraordinaries by T.J. Klune. And as you know, maybe, I like this author. I really loved the books he wrote that I read before I started this trilogy. And this book just, I had the same problem with this book that I had with the last book, which is that I just saw the plot coming about 350 pages in advance. No surprises for me, and it just felt a bit flat and uninteresting because I knew everything would happen the way it then eventually did happen. But also then I'm thinking that just maybe these are books for like 14-year-old boys, and therefore that's the problem I have with this book, that I'm not a 14-year-old boy. But in general, it was not a bad book. And then another book I read is Vom Mond aus betrachtet spielt das alles keine Rolle by Anne Freytag. She is a German author, and I do not think this book exists in English, but I really loved it. Some other people said it's like a slow read. I completely disagree. I felt like it was amazing. Now, some parts of the story might be a bit slow, but that doesn't matter to me at all. I think the atmosphere, the house, her family, her surrounding, her thoughts, her way of putting her thoughts into and feelings into words, her whole world felt amazing to me. I could relate so much. It was funny, it was warm, it was a lot of feelings. Not everything was great, but I really, really liked it. Like, I really like this book, and I can highly recommend you read it if you speak German. And these are all the 12 books that I read this month, which brings me to 101 book this year. And I would have never thought that I could read 100 books in a year. And honestly, of course, I spent a good amount of time reading, and some months I just read like 2 or 3, maybe 5 books. So I definitely see that I could read even more. But actually for next year, which kind of brings us into like the yearly recap and look out, I don't want to read another 100 books. Like, if it happens, it happens. But yeah, there are a lot of other things I could do with that time as well, like knitting. I really did knit a lot in 2024, but I put it as one of my like New Year's resolutions last year to scroll less and read more, and I definitely read more. I definitely like watched less TV shows. I'm not so sure about less scrolling though. So I don't know, that's like a half-half. And about the other resolutions, like if you want to go back and see my video, you can do that. I feel like it's not interesting to most of you because these videos are not watched a lot. So I just want to say I'm really happy with how 2024 went personally. Like, I had a really good year, but because the world did not really have a good year, it often felt like a bit complex, a bit heavy, a bit hard, And that made my year worse. But then on the other hand, I'm still in a very privileged position. I was so lucky this year for everything that happened for me and my loved ones. And horrible stuff is happening all the time. But this past year, it really felt like a lot. It felt unfair. It felt not okay. It felt like, why is this happening? Like, why does no one or not enough people or not the right people stop the things? But in my personal life, all of my intentions that I set for myself kind of worked out. I spent a lot of time traveling and making new friends and being with friends and reading and taking pictures and spending time with family, and it was a good year. And looking out to 2025, actually today, I started the year I did that same thing a year ago. I started the year by going swimming with like a neighbor and friend of mine, and we had a good time. It was extremely cold. Like there was this another guy, and he said the water has like 6 degrees Celsius, which is about, let me calculate it, 44 degrees Fahrenheit, more so 42 maybe. So it was extremely cold. I would have thought it was colder the water, but these 6 degrees Celsius, it was cold. But still, I went in like 5 times and swam like a little circle. And I think that was a good way to start the year, because I haven't been swimming in lakes as much as I want to. So maybe that's something I can do more of again this year. And honestly, this year, I really wanted to keep it simple, like not many intentions, just, you know, survive the year, make the best of what's happening. But I have like a few little things. So I really wanted to just ditch the thing of like spending more time in nature, because I've been telling myself to spend more time in nature for the past 5 years. And I've always felt like I should spend more time in nature, and I never felt like I did enough of that. And I think that maybe it will always stay this way. So why tell myself and maybe then feel a little guilty if I don't spend as much time in nature as I want. And then also I thought a lot about like nature versus like culture, and how much that's actually not true. Like how much nature is in culture, part of culture, and how much culture dominates nature or is part of nature. So there isn't actually this divide between nature and culture that we think there is. But then also, I just love spending time under trees, in the mountains, in a lake. And that's what I mean. So I want to keep that part of my life, and maybe sometimes push myself a little bit to go outside. And then there's just one thing that I want, I think, from 2025, which is kind of like being there for myself and others. Like, I want to be a bit more soft to myself. I want to be a bit less of like a people pleaser. And I know this is hard, and I know this is a process, but it's just something, honestly, I want to be there for myself. But also, and that's also a really important part, and that's something I really want to focus on again this year, because, you know, it's happening. I am really happy with where I am with friends and family and people, and I want more of it because I need it and I want it, and it's wonderful to be there for each other, to have conversations, to do stuff together, or to just help each other out. And so I really also want to keep focusing on relationships with myself and others. And now I want to wish you a wonderful 2025. Let me know if you have like any intentions, if there's anything you're planning on doing, if how your December went. I hope you had a little bit of time to recharge, maybe next few days too. And I'm looking forward to spending 2025 with you on this YouTube channel. And yeah, thank you for being here. Now, I'm gonna link you a video here, and I want to tell you that there's Patreon, where there's a podcast episode every single week. So maybe if you want to have more content of mine, have a better insight into my brain even, go over there. And otherwise, I do hope to see you in this video or in the next video. And until then, goodbye.